Sorry, there's something else. So, hi everyone. Thank you very much for joining this very exciting Designers Craft session. It's the last one we have of this year, the year 2020. And I'm very excited about it. So I'm your host, Kagonya Awori, and I'm very passionate about user experience and design. As I always say, I believe that user experience and design is the channel by which we can create African technologies to solve our African problems. So today, it's going to be a very casual chat. I'm very excited to have a very esteemed audience and also a very esteemed panel. And we're really going to talk about what the year has been. So without much ado, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. And then you feel free to ask questions, by the way. So house rules, as always, kindly put your mic on mute, but if you feel like you want to ask a question, put it in the chat or put it in the Q&A. At any point in the session, I will pick out your questions and we will have the panel answer the questions. But we're very excited to have you, and let's just sit back and enjoy the show. So I'm going to begin, of course, as we say, it's ladies first. So Maureen, can you introduce yourself and tell us, who you are, what do you do? Karibu sana.
Thanks, Kagonya. Maureen Masharia here. I run a company called Spindle Design. We collaborate with various partners and organizations to bring new products, services, and businesses to the African market. Our goal is essentially to play our part in catalyzing innovation in Africa, and I'm looking forward to our casual conversation.
Excellent, excellent. Ich, go ahead, introduce yourself.
Hey guys, I'm Ich Gishuki. I'm a design lead in IDEO, IDEO.org. IDEO.org is a nonprofit design organization based in Nairobi, New York, and San Francisco. And we're able to reach over 30 countries worldwide. So I'm very happy to be here. Thanks, Kagonya.
Karibu sana, and thank you again. Magnus, tell us who you are.
My name is Murag Gishoke. Well, we are not related to H, but we are brothers by another mother. I go by the brand name Magnus. It's a brand name I've been building for a while, Magnus MG. I am a content specialist. I have a background in advertising and design, with 20 years experience. And now I'm going into UX. I've gone into UX writing specifically, and not UX design, but UX writing. And so right now I'm dabbling with content and also into UX writing. I run a company called Champagne Bling Content Lab. That's where I'll be doing a lot of the work and collaborations that I'll be working with. And really, it's really an African brand storytelling company. So a lot of the UX writing and UX, anything UX will come from there.
Yeah, really great. And really, the audience, thank you very much for joining. Again, for those who've just joined, feel free to type in your questions. There's a chat section there. And at any point in time, I might call you out to ask the question yourself, or I can read it out for you. So, Ich, Maureen, and Magnus, we are very happy to have you here today. So I just want to understand, how has the year been? It's been a pandemic year. The other day I realized that we are going into December. Can you believe it, guys? We are already in December. We could not have imagined. When COVID started, I thought it's going to be a 3-month thing, I have to admit. I just thought, this thing is going to go away in 3 months. But it's had very real impacts on what we do every day. So, Magnus, can you tell us, what has this year been for you? Has there been what are the highs and lows? What has this 2020 been for you in terms of design or your work? Yeah.
Well, for one, in general, it has probably been the most topsy-turvy year that I've ever had. It's been the best year I've ever had in the last 4 years. Okay, And best, I'll say it from different perspectives, which is I moved now my business now to start doing UX writing specifically. I was trying to double in UX design, and then I decided, no, I just wanted to stay in UX writing. I also started moving into content specifically. Like I really got my niche and started working towards it and really building it. It's been a lot of work. I think it's one of the best years that I've ever had, building a business from scratch. During a pandemic, I've built 2 businesses right now from scratch. Still business, still building. Yes, still building, but it's it's something I would never have thought of doing if I hadn't, if this pandemic never came in. I think I would still be in copywriting and advertising side. But because of the pandemic, I decided to actually shift completely into content and UX writing. So it's been my best year ever. Took big risks, and they're paying off one at a time. Yeah.
Do you feel the same, Maureen? Is this the best year you've ever had with Spindle? And tell us about it.
I mean, in terms of ability to work in my pajamas, yes, this has been the best year of my career. It's but yeah, I think obviously there's big economic changes there's macro level changes, there's ecosystem level changes, and then there's personal transitions and all of that stuff. I think for me, some of the things that have been good are like Magnus continuing to build a business. Our team has grown, our business has grown, but you look outside of that and see how economies are shrinking, that the economic gender gap is widening. So I think it's a bit of a bittersweet in some ways, but overall I'll say it's been an okay year.
It's been okay. So compared to 2019, was 2019 okay, and this is less okay? Or if you were to compare?
If you asked me what I'd be doing sometime last year, I doubt I would have given you an answer related to what I'm doing now. I was on a completely different career trajectory, and I would have given you an answer to the affirmative of that. But in terms of personal growth and business growth, I mean, there's a lot of things that if you're running a business in such a year, you have to figure out. And a lot of it is, like in the moment, you're seeing trends changing. Folks are coming to you for advice that you yourself don't have. And you're having to figure out, okay, gather the information and make a conclusion. I think just in terms of that kind of personal growth, which also leads to business growth, it has been a good year. Stretch opportunities are always, exciting for me that likes chaos in one way or another.
I like the word stretch opportunities. So have there been some stretch opportunities for you?
Definitely. I think I like everyone's perspective, but it's been a whirlwind of a year on a number of fronts. Lots of stretched opportunities, definitely. I went from jumping into 2020 with a lot of optimism, just like a lot of people, where it was the year for everybody. It was the year for 2020 vision. It was the year for a whole bunch of things, and then discovering this disease that's just killing everyone, and immediately going into like panic mode, because I remember there was simulations that showed that 90 million people will die in the world.
My goodness.
Just because of how highly infectious it was. So, and it is highly infectious. You can see the numbers just everywhere rising, more so in the West and things like that, but it's nowhere near what we thought will happen. So yeah, went into this panic, lockdown, work from home. I was working in a previous organization where we just moved to new offices and kitted them out. So we had these whiteboards, new desks, new boardrooms, and then we just had to go home immediately. And then, getting into working from home and it being exciting for a while, then you get your work from home blues. You don't have access to tools. You don't have the same kind of office in the house. Kids are in the house, schooling, e-learning, sharing. All of a sudden discovered you don't have enough laptops in the house and things like that.
Mhm.
So it's been quite interesting. But on the positive side, managing to stay afloat, both in the previous company with previous clients and even new clients. And then an interesting transition to IDEO.org around September. And also just jumping in there and learning a lot and jumping into projects. So it's been quite a positive year, I'd say.
And by the way, congratulations on your transition to IDEO. I see Tosh in the crowd. So yeah, it's really good that we have, people transitioning, because, I must say that the UX world is quite small. And so we all know each other. So it's still the same sort of family, no matter where we transition to or where we go to. It's the same family in different, you could say, dockets. So yeah, congratulations on that. So are there some 2 lessons you've learned this year that are particular to the year? Because it's been a strange year. So what are 2 things you've learned this year that are different from maybe what you learned last year? So there's some 2 lessons.
Yeah, I think off the top of my head is kind of ways of working, just how normal we went into calls, conferencing and conference calls. That it used to be so foreign before, unless you were really working in a scenario where you had to do this type of calls. We went into this so quickly. Zoom, the company, grew so massive, and all these other ones sprouted like Microsoft Teams and Google Meet, and it became the new normal. So that was quite an interesting learning, that things that we used to take for granted, or things that used to look difficult, changed so quickly. Also, just with COVID, a whole bunch of other things became normal, like sanitization, masks, distancing, washing our hands longer with soap. And now those are so normal. So there's kind of those shifts. And then there's shifts in our work, like actually our work always starts with research. So having to work, how do we work in this pandemic, conduct research, while keeping safe, while trying to do it remotely? What do we gain? What do we lose by doing that? There's quite a few things we lost, like, workshops, interviews didn't have the same punch. But yeah, there's been quite some learnings, both personal and professional.
Yeah, and so like Maureen, I'm interested to know, because so you have Spindle, and then there are ways of working that you're used to in 2019. Are there some new lessons that you've learned that are very particular to 2020? I like that each has mentioned like these new ways of even doing research. What has that journey been for you? What are these 2 lessons you've learned this year that are very specific to this year?
I feel like we should give each more time to tell us about these new ways of doing research. But I think if I were to reflect on 2020 against the other years, I would talk about 3 things. 1 is the power of your network. Number 2 is just how mental health and psychological safety cannot be underscored. Cannot be, you can't downplay that, and the power of resilience and grit. When I look at not just my own personal journey and the journey of our company, when I look at the ecosystem at large and folks that are continuing to succeed, continuing to press on, there's an element of these 3 or some of them to larger degrees. For example, folks that have been able to see not just the challenges, but see the opportunity in that because of resilience and grit, and are wanting to find solutions, are wanting to seek opportunity rather than just collapse within the challenges that the pandemic has presented. So I think just my own personal resilience and grit, and how doing things that I'm afraid of unlocks the fear of doing them. I think that's just been a personal learning that I've also seen reflected in a number of other organizational leaders. Importance of mental health. We can talk about mental health as a topic on its own, and psychological safety, and how we establish that either not only within our organizations and our teams and the folks that we lead, but also in the ecosystem at large. As businesses are closing and folks are forced to have to think about all of the things that Itch was talking about. And, I think it's important to recognize that even on this call, we're speaking about it from a place of privilege, right? And we get to sit in front of laptops with Wi-Fi connections and electricity and all of these things. And there's so many other people, even within our own organizations, that don't have those facilities. And what does it mean when someone loses a job and then gets sick and you're the primary breadwinner? And how do you show up at work? How do you lead a team through such a transition? And how do you maintain your own mental health and psychological safety when you're also thinking about, hey, even me, I have to pay rent and I have to close gigs and I have to grow my business and stuff. So I think that's been a big challenge for me, and I've had a support system and folks that have come around to help with that. And the last really is, the value of your network. And I think looking back, it's easy. And when I think of my own journey, it's been easier to step out of the limelight and give that to other people. It's been easy to, work behind the scenes, but you realize that COVID-19, especially whether you're running a business or not, there's some level at which, we're in a digital space, and that digital space has become saturated very quickly. And so we need ways of differentiating ourselves, our competitive advantage, and being able to tap into different opportunities. So the value of our networks to be able to do that as we're doing our own CV and brand building, etc. type stuff, I think is one lesson that I knew but have seen just the all importance a lot more this year.
I love that. So far I've got these gems of words, right? Resilience, grit, new ways. So those are 2 words, new ways. There's also psychological safety. So now I'm asking the audience, what are these new words that express what 2020 has been for you? Feel free to type into the chat, right? Respond to, you have 2 options. You can respond either to me directly or just respond to all attendees and just tell us what are the words that have captured 2020, right? So that there's some words that they'll be enigmatic about that year. So please write them down, and we'd love to share them with everyone else. A question that I've got from Lavette Baraza. Lavette, would you like to ask it yourself, or do I go ahead and ask it for you? It's a very good question. Okay, let me proceed and ask it on her behalf. The question was, should love to hear about these new ways of doing research, especially if you're designing for people with no access to the internet. So could you just, and I know Maureen also said, what are these new ways of doing research? And so before we get to Magnus, Itch, you've put yourself squarely on the hot seats. Please go ahead. What are these new ways really?
Yeah, I definitely on the hot seat. And first, I'd like to say, thanks for the question. And also there's something Maureen touched on, mental health and just kind of states of mind that also have to be designed for, that we can talk about later. So COVID and all the rules around not being able to be in contact with people, not being able to travel either as a directive, like a corporate directive, or due to actual lockdowns by the government, and not being able also to travel internationally most of the time. It leads us to need to design how we do research, for example, better, and maybe how we also look at prototyping and things like that once projects get there. So the first thing is to jump to remote research, and say for interviews, you're looking at places where you're using telephones more, or chat, or things like Zoom. But then you start losing a few things, like you have data loss or distortion from the absence of visual cues, facial expressions, body language. You lose contextual data from your participants, like information about the environment, physical features of the respondent. How do they look? Do they look sick? Do they look healthy? What are their manners? What's their race? What's their age? And we lose all that in things like phone interviews, which were very valuable before. But at the same time, those are kind of some losses we have to take as we build new tools and new ways of working and shift how we work. Build on remote tools, looking at things like how do you recruit for research? You can't go to the field anymore. Maybe there's people you can work with that are on the ground. So building those networks, for example, of research assistants, gatekeepers,
intermediaries.
Exactly. And this could be professionals or professional organizations to priests and chiefs and people like those. Get them to give you, say, phone numbers of people you can talk to, or invest in very quick in-person recruitments, which are followed by remote research, like through phone calls and things like that. In some cases, you actually have to equip these people with tools to be able to respond to your research, like tablets, like phones, move into electronic signing of documents. If you're seeking consent or signing any contracts, use WhatsApp, use Telegram, pay for incentives with digital cash, M-Pesa, etc., or give them equivalents in things like airtime and bundles. Invest in a whole sort of, kind of collaboration suites, collaboration tools like Google Docs, Suite, Zoom, Mural, Miro, Figma, all those things come into play. A bunch of designers will know what we mean. Then there's actually like an ethical side of things where as much as you're keeping safe yourself and you're keeping maybe your research assistants or organizations safe, you need to keep the participants safe as well. So invest more into making sure your research plans and budgets have extra budgets for personal protective equipment for your participants and not just yourselves. So if I'm interviewing you, I start by giving you a mask and sanitizer and physical distancing, and I let you understand the need for us to be safe. And then we conduct the research. So avoiding crowded spaces, things like that. And yeah, just not just talking about it or testing it out, but building this research playbooks and toolkits into your design ops as a designer.
So being very adaptive to the current time, so that now you change your research methods based on what's going on. So as you mentioned, you can adapt to new tools of investigation, right? Where there are remote tools that have developed right now. I love that you mentioned there's Mural and there's Miro. At first I got very confused, but yeah, there's those two tools which are very excellent for like remote design thinking sessions, design sprints, etc. You also mentioned that now using intermediaries. So who is on the ground? If I want to do a research in Bungoma and I can't have access to that, I can't travel, but who can I get who's already there? Who can be that intermediary or the middleman to get there? You've also mentioned then now making sure that you're safe and they're safe. So I think these are really, really, really good tips. I like that we've got a few more words about 2020. So Juliet says 2020, so sorry, Judy Guitari says 2020, the word that comes to her is redefine. And I like that, like redefine, and really matches what we've been talking about, right? With it is like redefine your ways of working, redefine how you're doing things so it fits within what's really going on. Tosh tells us 2020 equals to Zen and peace of mind. I'd like to hear more about that, but I think it very much resonates with what Magnus was talking about. But it's like sort of peace of mind for you to have such a great year that you even do more things and bigger things in 2020. So Magnus, tell us, are there more words that have molded your 2020, and what are these 2 lessons you've learned about this year that are particular to 2020? Oh, you're on mute though. Yes.
Right. One word that I keep having, and I think I've had it for a while, maybe because I've been going through that, sorry, just set up my camera properly, is the word reset. For me, that word has been constant in my vocabulary for a while. I have actually been working remotely, well, doing more advertising side, copywriting from that side for the last 5 years. Okay. So I had to, it was very easy for me to just kind of change to working from home. It was normal, you know, when everyone used to ask me, where's your office? I said, I work from home, and then everyone looks at you weird, like you're a briefcase person, you know? So this year was a reset for me because I had to also change that thinking. It used to actually make me feel really weird. You know, and, you know, you're going for a big job pitch and people ask you, where's your office? And you have to say, no, I work from home. So it was a really big reset for me. And I really felt so nice about it when I say, you know, I work from home. Nowadays, it's a privilege to work from home. That's one of the things for me. That's one of the words. 2 lessons that I've learned is that I'll be just concise. You can get so much done in so little time. That's one of the things that 2020 has taught me. We had very few working hours, or we would say working hours that were viable, you know, to work with people. You know, you start working from maybe about 8 o'clock to almost maybe 3 o'clock, you know, when the lockdown came the first time. And you'd find that you would actually get so much done, you know, than your usual day. Yeah, you know, and you used to ask yourself, how did I used to not meet my, you know, be able to do, I used to work until 8 p.m., until 9 p.m. Yet this time by 3 p.m. I have to have left the office to be in the house by 5, you know, and I finished my work. So that's one of the biggest lessons. For me, you can get so much done in so little time. Number 2, biggest for me also is the myth that only women can multitask was busted.
Hey, Magna.
Completely.
I know. Why are you trying to bash women?
No, it's always been said women can multitask and everything. And the thing is, this 2020 has just taught everybody, you know, you're in the house, you have to, you know, the kids, I'm sure it knows that story. You all know that story, you know, kids are everywhere, calls are coming here, there's someone at the door, you're in the middle of a meeting, probably chairing one, you know, there's so much happening and you've got to manage it. And it's not going to go away. It's not a one-day thing. It's not a 2-month thing. This is probably going to be your life for a while, and then you've got to figure it out, you know? So a lot of people who I know, both men and women, even, I mean, it's not just women who multitask, who you know, people say that can't multitask. I think it's an individual thing, really, but people learned the skill of how to multitask. That it's actually a skill. You can actually learn it. It's not easy, but you can actually learn how to start doing various tasks. Of course, it's not productive to do so many things at the same time. Of course, we all know that. But you know, maybe short-term things. You're doing one thing and you're trying to coordinate one thing with another. I'm trying to do this Zoom call and trying to make sure that, you know, food in the kitchen is, you know, still going on. You know, something's still happening. So that was almost impossible before 2020 because people do one thing at a time. But now 2020 has taught you, you know, you can actually start doing and manage. Maybe I think the right thing is manage, not necessarily do, but manage a number of things at the same time. And it can be learned. It's a skill that you can actually learn. And once you learn it well, you'll know where you'll fail. You know, you'll juggle a few balls and say, this I can't do, this I can do. Others you'll say, okay, I can do this and I can do this and I can do this together at the same time. Mm-hmm. So those are the 2 major lessons for me.
I think that's really powerful. And you were talking about sort of juggling and multitasking. And I know many of us are familiar with, you know, understanding what work-life balance is. But, you know, 2020 has taught us it's work-life integration. Yeah. So we're moving from trying to balance these 2 different weights who are, you know, separately here and separately there. Now it's work-life integration. How does it integrate? Yeah. Because now your office has moved into your house. Yeah. Or maybe your house has moved into your office, whichever way you choose to think about it. So 2020 is really around that. And I think that's really powerful. So we have to now start to shift on maybe these thoughts we had around, well, as you said, you know, multitasking or doing short tasks consecutively. We really have to think about that. I like that the word we have from Lavette here, which is stillness. So stillness is the word that she gets about 2020. But the funny thing is that there's also been these moments where 2020 has been quite ridiculous. We're all familiar with this whole upsurge when now it became a trend or a phenomena to buy tissue. I mean, you'd not think that everyone is going to run into a supermarket and buy tissue paper, but that was the news, the global news around, April, May. So there's some ridiculous things that have even happened in the tech world. So we as designers, whether we are user experience designers, whether we are user interface designers or researchers or leads, design leads, we must have gone through some ridiculous things. So Maureen, could you just share with us something ridiculous that happened this year and you're just like, wow, that was interesting?
So I fortunately or unfortunately have been in a cave for most of 2020, and I will be in a cave for the rest of the 5 years that we have of 2020. So I may not have some concrete examples of this, but I think one of the things that I look on and have question marks about and is a lot of the international events that we see, especially around race issues and the current events that are happening, for example, in the United States. I think a lot of what that conversation brings up across a number of dimensions are just, some of them I look at and I'm like, okay, interesting. So I won't go into specifics, but I think that's one area that I look at and have questions about and find interesting things to pull out.
Okay, cool. So it's like it's interesting because right now, I think it's Magnus which you mentioned that there's so much more content online. Yeah. And in fact, even for me, like, there's so many more webinars and things that people have to attend to. In fact, Brian is telling us he has another meeting he has to run to. So there's all these things that are happening, right? Because now everything is online. So you think that with so much more content online, there's less, there are fewer things that can captivate our attention globally, but still we get involved in, Maureen, as you said, like news from one epicenter of the world. So we're all involved in, the American elections, for example. So it's quite interesting how, and that there's the politics of the internet, which of course is a whole topic that we're not going to get into today. But, it just makes you think around, it makes us now to be more conscious about this space that we are in. It's not just an amorphous space. It's actually dictated by rules. So we as designers, we as technology designers and researchers, we sort of have this role to play in ensuring that the space that is created is sort of fair for all, especially with our continent of 1.3 billion people. But I was wondering, are there some other thoughts that have come to mind or that have been sparked, or that just ridiculous moments you're just like, how is this happening?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, something that's very close to home was a friend of mine called me up a few months ago now and said a good friend of mine tested positive for COVID and said they're contact tracing and I was with them on a certain day. So, they think I should go and get tested just to be safe. And that was kind of in the earlier days of COVID. So like, I just really panicked and set up these tests, and the test would come back 48 hours later with a weekend in between, so just adding to the anxiety, and then kind of just went into this mode where I was trying to really understand what to do if I'm positive, like how do I isolate, how do I boost my immunity. So actually went and bought a whole bunch of vitamins, zinc, calcium, more vitamins, more zinc, crazy juices.
C,
yeah, then I'd gargle like warm, salty water every couple of minutes. And it was actually pretty scary. I feel like it would be less scary now. I think, I don't know, maybe we have more information or we're less scared. But back then it was like really daunting. I was watching how people had put out content on YouTube on how they're dealing with COVID in the home. Because you can imagine, like with all the numbers in the US, all those guys are not in hospital. So they're getting better at home. And so there's all this content now available on, how to isolate yourself in a room, how to deal with the dishes, how to deal with your family, how to entertain yourself and things like that. So I started looking into that. And at the end of it, when I tested negative, everything looked so funny, like all those measures I'd taken, like I had all these vitamins still remaining in my kitchen and all these juices. And I actually found that it was actually, a ridiculous thing to go through and try and solve with all that stuff. And it works on your mental health also a little bit, because you doubt everything. Like you clear your throat just normally, and you're like, hey, why am I clearing my throat? Like, any normal thing becomes a bit abnormal. So that was
I
crazy.
remember, I remember I was with a bunch of people, and then we're listening to a song, and the lyrics were like, "You give me fever." And that is usually to mean that this person is very much in love. And one of my friends was like, you can't use that word in 2020. You can't say you give me fever, because it's like you're giving me COVID. And then you can't even cough in public. So some people now, they have to exit a room and go downstairs and cough, because coughing in public is taboo, So it's quite ridiculous what this year has given us. So do you think that there's a role that design can play? So Magnus, do you think that we can actually, as technology designers, can we create solutions that can then respond to this? Or have you been part of projects that have tried to respond, not specifically to COVID, but any, in terms of health, whether it's mental health, as Maureen has brought up, or just health? How can we as designers or technology designers respond to this?
That's an interesting one.
Magnus, then
I've not been on any particular projects for health. In fact, I've actually been at that spot where now, actually, as we speak, I've been speaking to a couple of people who are in the mental space, and that's a conversation we've just started, which is very interesting this week. So I've actually not done any particular project, but we're in that space of we're about to embark on a project. What can we do? Well, from the UX space, I think there's a lot to be done, because there's a lot of communication that needs to be done. There's a lot of problems that need to be solved. There's a lot of solutions that need to be met, and all of them are technology driven, right? That means they'll need, of course, UX design. They'll need UX writing. Mm-hmm. In the mental space, well, I'm still trying to think. I don't know. I don't like saying that, we need to do an app, because that's not the first thing that we should do. No. But being part, I am a mental health champion, and we're trying to figure out what to do different than just an app. In fact, someone mentioned an app, and I switched off sometime this year. I'm like, that's not the thing I want to do. I want to be part of just creating an app. It's not big for me. So we are in the middle of that conversation of what can we do with design and UX design. I think we've not kind of solidified something in terms of where that is going in terms of the conversation. We just started it this year. But I believe there's so much more. There's a lot that we can do going forward. I still have to I still have to get, to sit with guys like H to kind of sit down and say, okay, what's happening in you and Kagonya and also Maureen, and see what can start up from that, from a mental health perspective. So I've not been really privileged in that until now. So yeah, it would be a conversation I'd like to also hear. Maybe Maureen would like to add something on that.
I feel like Itch might have all of the answers to these questions. Itch, today it's you and the bus, and I might be the one behind the wheel. But I think the short answer to your question is yes. There are a ton of things designers can do within this space. And I say that because designers are uniquely qualified, and yes, there are very many facets of design. There are very many, fields within UX, within HCD, within this, design, within this design space, design thinking. There's so many different skills and so many different practice areas, and I think designers are uniquely positioned in a couple of ways. We are taught to, see things first, and then think about solutions, and then see problems from a people's perspective, and then think about the enabling technology where it's appropriate to make those solutions come to life. I think that's such an incredible skill to have, especially at a time where the world is losing its minds and we're running around like headless chicken. It takes a sober mind to just sit down and say, okay, what do I see? I see problems. Therefore, you also should, well, not should, there are opportunities in that particular space. So I think it takes, know what's happening, see what the trends are, get familiar with different sectors, agriculture, education, health, financial inclusion. All of these spaces are places where challenges exist. And those are opportunities for designers to jump in and leverage their skill set and add their voice to their conversation. It might not be that design is what's shining, and to be honest, who cares? But yeah, it's adding what you have as part of a cog in a larger wheel. When it comes to, I guess, the health space, more specifically, the same answer still holds. We as Spindle have been working to think about a platform to help with mental health solutions, especially for business owners, SMEs, etc. Because a while back we kept hearing about how different founders, different SME leaders, different business owners are committing suicide or very odd things because businesses are closing down. It's such a privilege, by the way, to have a job and to have something that is giving you, a steady income. I think we take that for granted. Therefore, we may take for granted the impact that losing that has on a person's mental health. And so we're just like, you know what, we want to help. We want to, already entrepreneurship is such a lonely journey. It's a difficult one. So if we can help in one way or another to leverage our skill set to, create some kind of a platform that enables folks to be able to connect, to be able to share, to get the right kind of support from mental health professionals and people that are walking the same journey, that's something that we're looking into.
So it's exciting. So design can play a role because, sometimes people often think that design ni uchoraji. Even when you talk about being a UI designer, UX designer, it's often not understood what exactly we do. But design can play a role in solving these big issues, including health. So we're talking about Corona and COVID as something, a subset, but there's COVID, there's diabetes, there's cancer, there is, obesity, the non-communicable diseases are, the graph is like that. So now we know that there's a role, as Magnus and Maureen have said. So specifically, what is this role? Can we have concrete examples? So are there these very concrete ways that we can give our audience that is, it's a wide audience of some are designers, some are getting into design, and some are trying to understand what is the intersection of design and health?
No, yeah, definitely. And Maureen said I have the answers, but she just kind of took some definitely out of my mouth. There definitely are, and they're more needed now in mental health and other softer engagements. And the kind of history on COVID innovation has been, at least for Kenya, that we were very quick to form certain groups on WhatsApp and other collaboration tools, and then call them, like innovation for COVID. And for some reason, I had to figure out now, it was very driven towards making. And by making, I mean, what's the next thing you can make? I'll give an example. Like there was all this making of the tap that you don't need to use your hands, like you can step on something and water comes out, and a door that you could open with your leg, and all these kind of making things that were kind of physical and reaction to the physical aspects of contracting COVID. But if you think about it, there's now that people have lost jobs, lost their livelihoods and things like that, others are pretty anxious despite having jobs, just anxious about their family, anxious about their future. We need to design for those more serious aspects of health, like mental health, and what I'd call kind of softer engagements, like just dealing with the sick, dealing with the people who are at risk, dealing with how you move to places where you need to watch yourself, like visiting parents and elderly, going to church, going to places where we congregate, like church, parties, clubs, transportation, etc. We need to design for those. And I think those are way more easier to design than to make very physical tools, because with physical tools, it's also hard to scale them and distribute them. So if we're talking about quick research by designers who are here and in all those other groups I'm talking about, to look at what you can do for mental health and come out with things like playbooks on how you should act. And these playbooks guide you on how you, say, form your support systems and toolkits and things you can use with your support system to keep yourselves just healthier mentally every day. Playbooks and toolkits as guides for softer engagements, like I was saying, dealing with the sick. We don't have to avoid them. We don't have to, totally avoid them. Some are our relatives, they're in our houses. So how do you isolate but keep them safe, keep them supported, keep yourself safe, and not let them get affected by the fact that they're sick or at risk of being sick. Like, for example, if you can't visit your parents because they're elderly or at risk, what's the playbook of visiting them? Like, because you have to see them at some point. So, those things can be designed. They can be simple ways that we can look at doing this and solving some of these things.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead, Maureen.
I think I'd add to that, or just outside of the mental health space, just healthcare in general. And when you look at healthcare in general, because we're on the topic of healthcare, and we can apply, the thinking about design and it's, how to integrate it within different facets and different sectors as a broader conversation. But I mean, healthcare constitutes a significant household expenditure in Kenya, with over 2.6 million people driven to poverty by health costs and repeatedly falling sick, failing to seek treatment because they don't have adequate financing. This demographic of people spends over 40% of its non-food expenditure on healthcare. And when you consider that, that's catastrophic. Combine that with the fact that supply chains are disrupted in one way or another, economies are shrinking. The disposable income of such populations it's shrunk even more. So we have folks with an out-of-pocket expenditure for health, which represents 32% of their total healthcare expenditure in Kenya, and sources of financing for that are not incredible. So access to that healthcare is even harder, and then financing it is a challenge. And that's a place where a designer can look at and go like, what, there are these challenges that our low-income households are facing in terms of access and affordability to healthcare, outside of just like mental health and non-communicable diseases one. But once guys are there, can they actually afford it? Perhaps not. And then the folks that can't afford it, how do you actually get them the access? How do you enable them finance opportunities? How do you make some of these facilities a lot more affordable? The gig economy has blown up, but social protections for folks that are working within this economy are much less, including health and insurance protections. How do we innovate within that space and ensure that people actually have the tools to support them against shocks such as the ones that the pandemic amplifies? All those are things that we can look at and be like, let's begin to connect the dots, begin to have conversations, begin to collaborate, and I think innovative solutions come out of that.
And I like those questions because it's questions that drive. So when you ask, how can we create these shock absorbers? So no one, well, I guess they say Bill Gates predicted COVID, but very few people predicted this global pandemic. But how can we design for these and other shocks? So it doesn't have to be a global pandemic. You can have a family that to them, global is what affects us within our, environment. So how can design then buffer such a community? And you're right, Maureen, like health in Kenya, and this was pre-COVID, every year, 1.5 million people are moved to poverty because of health bills, just the bills. We know very well that no matter how affluent you are, you unfortunately, when a member of the family maybe has had to have been in hospital for 3 months, whatever time, you will need help from your community, from your circle of friends, etc. So health is a very critical thing that can move families from comfortable to tipping down. So then design can play a role in understanding what are these concerns, how then can we help people to understand, an association with insurance? Because we know, again, in Kenya, our relationship with insurance, life insurance, is not very healthy. But then how can we package it in a way that people can understand, today you're okay, but tomorrow, hello corona or whatever other catastrophe. But I believe, Magnus, you had something to add.
Yeah, I was just thinking because being in the mental health space and having interacted quite a bit in there, from perspective of a patient and a perspective of a designer, one of the things that I noticed, and with health, I don't know if Maureen has seen that, I'm sure other people have seen it, is there's a lot of information that is not very available. And now this is one thing about most people who are going through mental health challenges. Insomnia is such a huge thing, right? It's so big. It's probably the biggest thing that you can ever go through as a mental health challenge. And one of the things we look for is information. Okay, this is 2 a.m. in the night, 4 a.m. in the night, you can't sleep, and you're trying to get help about what is happening. So the first thing, of course, you do is go and Google, right? One of the things that I had been thinking about for a while, and I don't know if it's there, probably someone has done it, was to actually use chatbots to actually get people to interact with people at that time. Because what I want to do at that time is talk to each, but each is asleep. Maurice is asleep. Kagonya is asleep. Everybody's asleep, and I need help. How am I going to get this help before morning comes? And chatbots are probably one of the best ways, interacting, with good writing on it and a good interface, everything will be able to help a lot of these people navigate through that particular very, very lonely period, few hours that they have before everyone wakes up, on how to navigate, on what to do. Maybe they're having an anxiety attack. Maybe they're having a challenge, a really, really difficult challenge, and probably they're alone, especially during these COVID times. A lot of people have been alone. So you need someone to help you. You need something to get, to help you from stage to stage, or to keep you until at least you can actually get professional help. And I noticed that because that's something I struggle with a lot. I have to go and start digging the information. Now, considering the state of mind that I was in at that particular point, also I don't probably get the best kind of information because my state of mind is also everywhere. But if I have a chatbot that gives me information, sends me to the right people, tells me this people to call, takes me through my entire anxiety attack, which probably was 30 minutes, helps me to breathe, reminds me to take water, and takes me through without the help of course, a human being. That's one of the things that I've been thinking about. And I think that's why I didn't want to do anything like an app particularly. I wanted to do something that would really help someone at that point without much human interaction. But well done, well designed, and very informative to help me at that point. That's one of the things I've not seen yet. If it's there, I've not probably interacted with it, but I would love to see something like that. I would love to be part of a team that builds something like that.
I like that conversation because it's now, for those people who are new to design in the audience and who are watching later, you see the role of design is we're creating solutions. So as Magnus is saying, the best solution here might not just be a simple download this app, but it could be a chatbot that can access. Maybe when you go to this website, then you can talk to a chatbot, which can make, which feels like a friend at, 2 a.m. And that's like a personal doctor, but you're talking to it on the phone. So in design, we begin to understand, what are these, what is someone experiencing at that time? I like that what you mentioned was loneliness. So we never thought that loneliness could be an issue that we're facing, but it is. And COVID has even escalated it further, with self-isolation and all that. So we designed to help people who are experiencing loneliness. we design solutions for people who are experiencing anxiety and many other factors that are not necessarily just being sick, but all these other factors around it. I really like what we were talking about, these words that are defining the year. And I see Brian had said that his word is prioritization. And when I thought of prioritization, I was thinking 2021 is coming up, right? For this last 5 minutes, because again, time always flies. But for these last 5 minutes, I guess I'll give you guys just 30 seconds each. Do you have predictions for 2021 when it comes to design? What do you think the predictions are? What do you think, how do you think your role might maybe drastically change as we go into 2021? So yeah, I think I'll start with Magnus and then we proceed. So do you have any predictions or foresight, or maybe when you just have, resolutions for 2021, but it comes to the role of technology design or what you're doing? You mentioned UX copywriting. Mm-hmm. You're on mute, sorry.
One of the things that I see becoming really big, probably had been churned for a while, were chatbots. I think that'll go really big in helping people navigate through different things, whatever it is. It could be buying, selling, it could be whatever, to hospital, it could be whatever. I see that really going big. It was already, had already started going big. I think it's also because I'm also interested in it, and I've been doing a specific course for chatbot writing. I also see, online restaurants go big for me. I think that's probably two things that I see really going big. We'll stop having to go to the particular restaurant and just order in our food, and we meet in the houses and we eat. Maybe I think that's probably the two things that I see. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. The other day I had this virtual whiskey tasting where everything's delivered to my house, and we have a virtual meeting, and we're all, looking at the yellowness of a liquid. So can you imagine having such an experience? It sounds quite absurd. So I think I agree with you. There'll be these sort of online restaurants, and then chatbots is a very interesting one. Maureen, what are your predictions for 2021? What do you think will change or evolve or become bigger?
I think in 2021, I get rich to the extent of retiring by the end of the year. Is that an acceptable prediction? No, but I think I won't make a prediction per se, but there's kind of some trends that we're already seeing now that I think will continue to persist. One of those big ones is, the persistence of digital transformation as a theme. And I think this is something that designers can be involved in, and digital innovation, because, and I'm not just talking about building some kind of app, I'm talking about that infusing of digital technology into every part of business that affects not just the business model, but also how we create, capture, and deliver value, that kind of transformation. If you think of yourself as a designer and you think about that as a trend for organizations, hopefully you can immediately begin to see how your skill set is relevant in helping organizations transition through that. And for us, it's been something that we've seen a lot of folks come to us for advice on how they should do it, where to begin, what skill sets they need, blah, 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 what's the process. And I think designers can play a part in that. Another thing that we see a lot, and I think more to the point around responsibility, is a note on accessibility, even as we talk about health and designing for accessibility. As we continue to go digital, there are inevitably more opportunities for designers to create those interfaces, to build those delightful experiences, to put out excellent content that is threaded together in an amazing story that helps capture the hearts and minds of people. As a designer, you can do that. There's also a risk that we do that for people just like us and forget to design for things like accessibility. And the gap will continue to widen the more we fail to pay attention to some of these, blind spots, so to speak. So I think that's another theme that I've seen with organizations wanting to take more responsive, to not just be responsive, but also have more responsibility. And I think including design for accessibility in our services, our products, our communication, etc. is something that I hope continues as a trend within 2021.
I mean, that's spectacular. You know, we can't design for people who look like us. In fact, that's the reason why lots of technologies may not work for the global South or the African continent in particular, because they were designed by people who are dissimilar from us. But now even us locally, we have to ensure that we design for people who are not like us. I mean, I hope too that that's a very strong trend in 2021. What are some trends that you're predicting in terms of design?
Yeah, a lot has been said that I wanted to touch on, but I think we're going to be home for a long time. We're going to be home until there's a viable vaccine that's trusted, distributed, and affordable. So we're going to have to design for, like I said earlier, places that we congregate, like schools, restaurants, churches, sporting events, politician campaigns, parties, transport, etc. And just design how we show up in those spots, because people are inevitably going to kind of be pulled into these places. Like you've seen a couple of politician events happen recently and the crowds that just go there. You've seen guys go to parties anyway. Teenagers get tired of being home and really want to go out. So I think instead of all these restrictions, we have to start designing how they show up to these places. And designers can definitely do that together with the people who actually are going to these spaces. So imagine a co-design scenario where you talk to people who want to party to design their solution together with professional designers guiding them, and come up with a way to show up in these kind of congregating areas. So I think another thing is we definitely have to design for getting sick and recuperating at home. So how do we make sure we can do that without needing to run to hospitals and fill them up, without cost, given the economic scenario is not very good? So what are the medicines, the immunity boosters, the ways of isolation, sanitization, and then ways to keep your mental health well-being okay, and build like a moral support system. And this can also be designed, because we know how our homes look, all levels, all different types of homes, from the affluent to the bottom of the pyramid. We can work through designs that show how we solve for this. And I think another one that's kind of close to my heart is we need to design for the electronic and physical education administration to primary and secondary kids, because the majority are at home. I think there's a bunch of our kids that are jumped onto e-learning because of private schools, but the majority of the kids in primary and secondary have been home since March. So we need to see how we design for their education physically, because they might not have access to electronic means. And it's actually a very big and interesting question to solve, how they go back to education, because they've been out long enough without education, and we still, COVID is still there.
Yeah. And I like that the first point around co-design. So how do you design, like, for the entertainment? I remember there's this one app that became very popular at the beginning of COVID. I don't know, show of hands, any of you who has you can raise your hand, virtually on Zoom. Any of you who downloaded the House Party app? And it was marvelous because it allowed us to see each other, and it was created for people to sort of engage, but virtually. But it sort of died down. But then there are more ways that people are going to meet, yeah? Not necessarily physically, but there's augmented reality, virtual reality. There are many other ways for people to engage. So we're going to tap more into these ways, given the fact that physical connection might not be the only option for us to engage. So I think that's a very strong point. You can tap into. I'd love to have a session with like DJs and I don't know, a whole bunch of different people, and we sit down and we think, how can we create a space for people to meet, right? And then that can become a product. So really that's about what design is for guys in the audience. That's really what about design is. So we create solutions to a problem. So the problem is that it could be loneliness, it could be separation, it could be the fear of association physically. Then we think, how can we create a solution for this? Then we bring experts to the room. So an expert in getting people together could be an MC, could be a socialite, we don't know. But now we bring them and then we say, let's work together. You guys are experts in this, we're experts in this, then we co-design. I mean, that's very, very, very great. And I like that the crowd, I mean, we're getting, like Stephen is saying, being home is the new normal, it's the way of life, and it remain even when you move back to the former normal. I like that term former normal because we always say new normal. I never thought of former normal, but it's true. And indeed, so, working from home is here to stay. And, many companies are even switching to this permanently. And yeah, so I'll just end with, as Tosha said, it's been a very great conversation here. And thank you very much for the crowd. I know this hour always passes like this, and there's so much more to talk about. And yeah, thank you very much for being engaged. And this is the last Designers Craft of the year. We've had 6 this year. We're very, very happy to have had 6 this year. Awesome conversations. Yes, thank you very much. If we'd like to have more, thank you very much, guys. If you want to listen to the past Designers Crafts, they're all on YouTube. So you can access the YouTube channel Designers Craft, and you can access very many sessions. I remember the first session was with Magnus. I've also had a session with Itch, and even next year we'll have a one-to-one session with Maureen, because as you can tell, there's lots of gems of wisdom from her. So definitely keep engaged, and tune in next time. And we're very happy to have you here, and have a lovely, lovely end of year. 2020 has been an incredible year, and despite the ups and downs. And we're hoping for even a more awesome 2021. So asante sana, guys, and have a great December holiday.